Now, a word about animals on the Mark Thompson Show.
Our guide through a word about animals is Karen Dawn. Hi, Karen. Karen of DawnWatch. It's a robust Facebook community. It's also there online, and I subscribe, so I get Karen's emails regularly, kind of a way to monitor what's happening with animal issues and with animals and with the press and media, the way animal issues are discussed. So check it out at DawnWatch.com, and you can sign up like I have, and you'll get it automatically. What's up for today, Karen?
Hey there. You know, before we talk about what's up for today, I just want to thank you for that beautiful segment with Beth. And what I feel so honored. I'm so thrilled to be have her precede the DawnWatch segment. I have to share that when Buster Dawn died in 2009, I had a piece in the local paper remembering Buster Dawn. And it had a photo of Buster and me together with him doing his morning exfoliation treatment on my face. And I mentioned in that piece, and this was before pet bereavement was as widely accepted as it is now, thanks to people like Beth. I mentioned that Buster was the closest being ever in my life, which was a pretty unusual thing to mention at that time. But you know, sure, I had other family members, but I didn't sleep with them every single night as an adult. And people would have looked askance if I did. That was for Kim's askance there. I will never forget that the week after that piece came out, I was at the local market in the Palisades on the Sunday morning, and a complete stranger came up to me and asked if she could hug me, and she wrapped her arms around me to thank me for that piece, and particularly for being willing to say out loud that I had never been closer to another being than I had been to Buster, because she had felt exactly the same and felt like she, you know, society treats her as if she's some kind of freak because she feels that way. So
I've talked to so many people who say they will never get over the loss of dog, cat, fill in the blank because of that relationship you described. I remember being in Bed Bath & Beyond. This is a few years ago, another cat that, again, you know, you have to make this horrible decision, and it's the most beautiful decision on one level, but horrible on another. And I just started weeping. Bed Bath & Beyond. It was like weird. Like it was a day and a half or 2 days after, and I was inconsolable. And you're right. You choke down that emotion because it feels awkward to say this thing affected me so much, but you know, it's powerful. Yeah.
And it makes so much sense that it does, because most of us just are not as close to our family members as adults as we are to our pets. So,
and every time I drove by Bed Bath & Beyond, I cried, everyone. That's the beautiful, no, that's not true. But but it is true, family members. So yeah, I'm glad we spent a moment on it, and it clearly resonates with a lot of people. So right.
And I'm going to use it as the most perfect segue into our segment today, because what we're talking about with that segment and with Beth is that society does not treat society and our laws, and I've mentioned this before, our laws are generally out of touch with the way that most people feel about animals, just like what is socially acceptable to say is out of touch with how most people feel about the animals in their family. And generally animals are the whole animal thing can be looked on as sort of lesser and less important. And I'm going to start this segment with the hugest shout out to the Los Angeles Times. I'm absolutely in love with that paper and those editors, because while they don't see animal issues exactly the same way that I do, and they don't, you know, do lots of stories on why everybody should go vegan, which, you know, is something that, of course, I would love to see. But what DawnWatch, my organization, was set up to do was to encourage the media to do a better job of covering animal issues so that people can make informed choices in line with their own values. And part of doing a better job of covering animal issues is to take them seriously. And God bless the Los Angeles Times for being willing to put animal issues on the front page on a regular basis, as if they matter. The Los Angeles Times isn't covering them on the back page every now and then. And so I just love, and when I say as if they matter, of course, I'm being ironic there, because they do matter. Because the story that I want to talk about today on the front page of the Los Angeles Times on Saturday was that ranchers who've had it with wolves killing their livestock are looking for permission to shoot the wolves. And there it is. Thank you, Tony, for showing that front page story. And
Thanks, Tony.
the reason it is such an important story that belongs on the front page is that this is a subsidy to the cattle industry. It's a subsidy that the vast majority of people are not, when I say subsidy, allowing ranchers to kill them. And we're also going to talk about in Santa Fe, the government's actually killing them. So when the government's killing them, it's a direct subsidy. And allowing ranchers to kill them, and the the DA in Sierra County has said she's unlikely to prosecute the ranchers if they do kill them, even though it's illegal and against.
I'm sure the killing's already going on now. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And the reason that's an indirect subsidy in that Californians are paying money. We have our budget going into protecting wolves, but then because the ranchers don't like them, we actually have the ranchers being tacitly allowed to kill these wolves who the people are paying to protect because we give a darn about them and because we want wolves out there. And this matters that we're subsidizing the cattle industry because the cattle industry is destroying the planet. So the whole idea that this story is anything other than of vital interest to most people is, I appreciate the Los Angeles Times for putting it on the front.
I mean, that tug of war that you described between the cattle ranching interests and animal rights interests or animal ethics, I mean, just to sort of like the ethical way you want things handled in your society. You don't just, pull out a gun and kill whatever is the problem. You try to seek solutions. And I'm sure the farmers would say, well, we tried to seek solutions and we can't find them. I mean, it's a problem. I mean, it's a legit problem. I mean, they're suffering legitimate losses, and they're not there farming so that they can serve up dinner for the wolves,
Exactly. And I loved the article being so even-handed about that, because it is a real problem. It's also a real problem for the cows. They're
trapped there
unapologetically. Exactly. They're on the fields there as if they are an open buffet for the wolves. So, and I'm unapologetically an animal rights activist, and that's going to be the number one concern that I'm going to speak about. So I care deeply about the wolves who have a buffet in front of them and do what becomes instinctive and is natural for them to do, which is to go for the easiest dinner there is. I feel deeply for the cows, and one of the issues being discussed in that article is a calf who had been mauled by the wolf and almost killed, and the mother cow is standing over the calf, and the farmer's wondering whether he should, see if the calf can recover or just leave them, and the wolves will come back the next day and finish the job. Now, of course, when the rancher is talking about seeing if the calf will recover, that's so that the calf can grow up and then he can slaughter the calf and
right.
make money there. So and a death in a slaughterhouse is not better than death by a wolf. And anybody who thinks it is doesn't know anything about what's ahead for that calf. And let me also mention that, the vast majority of animals who are eaten in this country live on factory farms. They are not out in the fields as we're seeing in this article. When you are driving up the 101 and you're seeing cows grazing, those are the cattle that are being discussed in this article. Those are beef cattle generally who have the most decent life of all the animals who are eaten, because they generally do stay with their mothers. in the early months, not years, sorry, early months. And eventually they end up at Harris Ranch in those disgusting feedlots where they're standing knee deep in their own manure, and everybody drives past and just can't believe this is the life we're relegating animals to. So if people are wondering, why do I see cows on the ranch? And when people say, oh, they're all in factory farming, beef cattle have the best. And but they do spend their last 6 months generally in these horrible feedlots. But when they're out on the range, and then we're reintroducing the wolves, because everybody wants wolves and is mortified that we basically wiped them all off the face of the country. When we have this situation that we are making the poor cows complete herbivores into an open air buffet for the wolves, we've got a real situation here. And of course, now as far as the farmers go, you mentioned that they have a real issue, that they are sustaining real losses. I think most people don't realize that farming, cattle ranching in generally, is highly subsidized. That when we see these cows grazing all over the hillsides, a lot of that is public land. And the cattle industry has deals with the government where they can rent public land for 1 cent an acre or 1 cent per head of cattle, which is, of course, nothing like what that land is actually worth. So we are already subsidizing the ranchers, and we have situations set up that when cows get killed, the ranchers get remuneration for those losses. So as much as, of course, it's difficult for the ranchers, I think it is important to remember that they're intending to kill these cows anyway. So it's an inconvenience for them, but it's not like, oh, these are their beloved pets who are being killed.
It's a commodity. It's a commodity to them, and it's handled in the way you handle commodities. Jim says, just on the pushback, the cows that die in the slaughterhouse end up feeding people. I get it. I understand how it works, but that's sort of to balance the cruelty, is I guess what he's saying.
Oh, the cows who die in the slaughterhouse end up feeding people. The cows who die in the range end up feeding wolves. I understand Kim might think feeding people is incomparably more important than feeding the wolves.
It was Jim, not Kim, but yeah.
Jim, sorry. Yeah. I know it wasn't you or Kim because it was he, Jim. Yeah. I'm an unapologetic animal rights activist who believes in a circle of life as opposed to a hierarchy of life. And I don't actually think that feeding humans cows slaughtered in the slaughterhouse is more important than wolves.
Right. You don't see it as a justification. Exactly. Right.
And there is a difference. A huge difference is that the wolves don't really have a choice. I guess if they knew that the cows were there for us and we actually are intentionally reintroducing them, they might try and do the polite thing and go after the deer instead. But they don't have a choice.
So really what you're saying, if we could only just explain to the wolves what the situation is. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I'm kidding, but also they don't have a choice. Whereas as far as the cows who end up feeding people, they end up causing heart disease, they end up destroying the planet. Mark, you and I know there are other choices. So I think, and I don't tell other people what to eat, but I do think it's important, and I appreciate the Los Angeles Times for putting this on the front page, that people know when they are eating their burgers that what's going on with the wolves, and what's good that the cows are there being killed by the wolves, that the wolves are now about to be killed by the ranchers despite our efforts to save the wolves. This is yet another reason why one might want to rethink the burger and go for the veggie burger. Again, people can do whatever they're ready to do and what they feel inclined to do, but I think it's worth planting that seed. Then the other story I wanted to call attention to, and this is one of the reasons I wanted to cover this today, is not only did we have the Los Angeles Times blessedly putting this on the front page in a very even-handed way, but in Santa Fe, the Santa Fe New Mexican had a piece on this, and it was an op-ed piece, and it was not evenly balanced the way the Los Angeles Times piece was. It's very much an advocacy piece for the wolves. It's extremely worth reading, and I'm going to send Tony along a link to it so that when this segment goes up in the air, that he can include this piece with the with our segment.
It says Mexican wolves deserve better than political betrayal.
Right.
That's what Tony has up right now. Those just listening, that's the piece title. And we'll have
right, and I appreciate that. And Tony, I sent along the full printout, and I had a box in red. I had circled a box in red that I hope you have there, because I'd love to read it out, which the point is made about exactly why.
We have to do it quickly. I'm afraid we're so over time, but go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let me this is what I pointed out, which was probably my favorite piece from, and this piece, by the way, goes into the fact that these wolves were killed by the government, wildlife services, and
that's the wolf annihilation was pursued by the government. Is your point?
Absolutely. And that wildlife services, when we're talking about the government needing to get rid of some spending, we really hope that we can bring Doge on board with getting rid of wildlife services. And it's interesting you mentioned that Facebook I have a active Facebook page. DawnWatch has a more active, I know that you are not a big fan of X, but DawnWatch has a far more active X page, Twitter page, at least daily for those of your listeners who are on X, because currently the Republicans are in power. And so if I certainly owe it to animals, I think, to make sure that Republicans are seeing what's going on, because talk about a waste of government money. These wolf killing departments really need to go.
Let me just read this really very quickly, because we really are so out of time.
Absolutely.
It is preposterous for humans to raise animals for livestock, it says, for their wool, their meat, eggs for human sales and consumption, yet not accept the risk they take by forging into that line of work. The wolf was here well before the Europeans, starting with the Spanish, introduced cattle and sheep. The wolf was here before the Europeans introduced cattle and sheep, is the point. To get angry and vengeful and have a government pursue their retaliation for being hungry is the height of colonial superiority. It's a really interesting argument that this is sort of the extension of colonialism for the government to then annihilate this predator that was there before the government showed up and before these creatures that were associated with that colonialism showed up. It's fascinating. Yeah, really interesting.
And it's a shocking waste of government money, both is spending it on killing the wolves. It's very much like the Mustang roundups, that the amount of money we spend getting rid of the wild horses that everybody loves at the behest of the cattle industry. And
it's also done recklessly. I mean, it's not done with any sense of a strategy that makes sense even. The cruelty is completely part of a recklessness, isn't it, Karen?
Absolutely. And in this case, we have the situation where we're paying so much money to restore these wolves, and then we're letting the cattle industry kill them in California or in New Mexico. The government's actually doing it for us.
That's crazy. Just absolutely crazy. I'm so glad you brought this stuff to us. I'm grateful for your presence the first Monday of every month. DawnWatch.com. Apparently she's smoking hot on X, if you love that platform. And you can find her on Facebook as well. And you can find her here, as I say, the first Monday of every month. Thank you so much, Karen. I look forward to the next time.
Thank you for covering these issues.
All right.
Join the flock again next time for a word about animals on the Mark Thompson Show.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.